Great. Happy New Week in Senate Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs. And today is Tuesday, so it must be housing. And it is housing. And we are going to welcome, to kick off the week, Gus Seelig and Polly Major to update us and both charge us with what our continued challenges are and how we might rise to meet this moment. So, Gus and Polly, however you want to do it, you're welcome to bring up another chair if you want to go together.
Sure.
I hope the rest of our committee will join as they are able.
Well, good morning, Madam Chair, committee members.
Good morning.
For the record, Gus Seelig, Executive Director for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board.
And for the record, Polly Major, Director of Policy Special Projects for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. And I can get a Zoom link, I can share my screen. Oh, yep, all right.
This is great to have this translated into what jobs these may be.
I hope so.
Great.
I'm gonna talk through what's there. They all have the presentation screen down in front of them, so if you want to start what we're getting up on the big screen.
Okay. Well, let me begin by, I'm going to hand the data and a lot of this off to Polly to begin with, but say a few things about our work in general. One, the governor has asked us to try to make transformational investments. And when I think about that, I think about what is the catalytic impact that we can have across the investments that we make. So, you know, the opening slide in your packet is from a project that we recently opened in West Rutland, and it was an area that had some blight. And when we all heard the town manager that day that we were in West Rutland together, she was very clear that she had plans for adjoining lots and more development, not necessarily more housing, though that may be among the mix. From our view as housing developed, as supporters of housing development, it's a great site. Supermarkets there, and the rest of the village is not far along. But I think it was that catalytic impact across the neighborhood that made that really an appealing project that we wanted to be supportive of.
So I just want to tag on that, because David and I, we were with you, and that was a really special day. And I got introduced to more of West Rutland and its eating establishments, which was delicious. Company was better. The question I have is, who tracks, going forward now, how do we track that impact? How do we track the transformational impact and the new things that arise, and how can we attribute some of the new development to that transformational investment?
You know, I don't think we've got a great method for that. You've heard me say, in particular as it relates to the TIF district in St. Albans, we are invested in, I think, about 150 of the 270 apartments and homes that have been built in that district. So I think if you were asking Don Cloud, did we have a positive catalytic impact by being the first developers in, I think he'd say yes. Similar with the new town center in South Burlington, we invested in 2 buildings right off the bat that private developers were working on. And then after those 2 affordable housing developments got going, they were able to attract UVM to invest in renting. UVM is not renting, but they did a deal with UVM, and for their employees, more buildings got built. So I think you're seeing that impact, but do we have an easy way to measure it? No. And, you know,
easy. I just said, do we have a way?
and I should say, you know, from my perspective, when I report to you on how many units we have funded, I don't report on the units that we didn't put any money into, but they're there, and I'm trying to tell you that story, that the success of the St. Albans TIF district with the new town center, St. Albans or Cambrian Rise in Burlington, is in part related to the public money coming in early and often first.
Yeah, no, I completely appreciate it. It's just, yeah. You know, we say this, we know in our hearts there's transformational change in all those communities in and around these initial investments.
Yeah, I mean, there's a private developer we worked with in Morrisville on a turnkey basis, so, and what I think he would say is that by flipping the first building, I can't remember, 25 or 30 units, with our profit, that freed up his capital, and then he went on and built market rate apartments, which were permitted and planned for adjacent to it in that neighborhood. So again, I don't report to you and say, well, we built 60 units, we invested in 30, but that's indeed exactly what happened. So as we go through this proposal, we're going to try to address the various issues, Madam Chair, that you just raised about what do we need to be thinking about, what have we been doing, and what are the issues that are continuing to confront us. And with that, I'll go to the first slide here. And this will be the last thing I say for a few minutes. But this is data from Zillow that I got when I attended the regional conference on housing issues. And what you see here is that the problem we're having is not a Vermont problem. It's region-wide, and in fact, I've seen some charts that tell you that the cost of home ownership across the whole United States has doubled from about $1,000 a month to $2,000 a month. Some of that due to the increase in interest rates, and some of that due to the increase in real estate. But our problems are national in scope. Sometimes we think, what's wrong with us in Vermont that we are struggling so much? But this is really a bigger problem than just Vermont. And the other thing I'd say about this first chart, and all you may want to add to it, is when people can't enter the home ownership market because the cost of home ownership has gotten so expensive, that's, I think, what's causing all the distress in the rental. One of the big things that's causing the distress in the rental market. It's not just that we have built less housing every decade for the last 4. It's that people who might have become homeowners with a different set of economics cannot become homeowners today. And so the competition for apartments is much more severe.
Yeah, the churn has been significantly reduced.
Yeah. So,
If I could, so the 67% increase for Vermont alone is startling. Is it offset by wages increasing a set? I mean, there's a little bit.
I'm sure a little bit, but I guess what I would say to you, Senator, is if you just think about 8 years ago being able to borrow at 3% or a little above, and now having to borrow at around 6%, along with price increases, that's
Sure, no, I get that.
But yes, there's some offset. And again, my main point here is that this is a problem across New England, not just a Vermont problem. But you're right, there's some progress if wages go up for people. But what we've seen across the state is that the number of renters who can afford to buy in this market has dropped drastically.
And I believe we have a data set on wage growth versus housing growth, and I want to go back and confirm that we have it, but I can follow up with you through what that's telling us. To zoom in on the rental market and to zoom in more in on Vermont, we know this is one of the areas where supply is most constrained across our housing market, and where the challenge of accessing housing is felt most acutely. And what we're going to do with this presentation is talk about some of the population and housing needs and how they contribute to our housing targets and goals in the state, and then dive into some of the tools that VHCD has at our disposal to address them and what challenges we see moving forward. So I think these two numbers here on the left are really striking, that the average renter wage in Vermont is $17 an hour. So the wage you need to afford a 2-bedroom apartment, so if you're a single caregiver with a child or another family member, you need to have a wage of $29 an hour to afford a fair apartment at fair market rent with 2 bedrooms. And that gap is what's squeezing households and making them make really hard choices in terms of renting apartments that they can't afford, or cutting back on other costs such as medication or food. The next chart that you see here, affordable and available homes for 100 renter households in Vermont, is really looking at where our supply is most out of line with our population. So each bar represents a different economic slice of the Vermont rental population and says how many homes are available to someone making that amount, who's searching for a home. So if you take 100 households that are extremely low income, 30% AMI and less, and we can get into what that means.
Sorry, is that what the tiny, tiny
That's
unreadable type
tiny,
is?
tiny, yes. So for every 100 households that are extremely low income, there's only 47 apartments that they can afford out there when they're searching. That really shifts as you get to a more median wage in the state. For every 100 households looking for an apartment at median wage, there's 101 apartments theoretically available. This doesn't go into, are they in the right spot? But what this does, so we know we're supply constrained across the spectrum, but that supply constraint is most severe at the lower end of the economic spectrum, and that's translated into the final graph here of rent burden, where you see because there's constrained supply at the low end of the economic spectrum, people are renting apartments that they can't afford, paying over 30, but mostly over 50% of their income towards housing, and that has devastating effects on their ability to participate in society.
Do you want to wait till the end, or?
We have, I believe, about an hour until 10:45. So if you need, yeah.
Okay. Well, this exact problem is one we've kind of been gazing at, right? And it's, the hourly wage you need keeps going up and up and up. Gus, particularly, you've been doing this a long time. You've seen the vacancy rate fluctuate. You've seen the market fluctuate. This is a metric that I don't think we can claim success until we start seeing the cost of rent come down. Not just for a certain subset of the population, but across the board. I take it as a sign of success that some of our private assessors are saying, like, Chittenden County is cooling off, you're not going to get the rents you want. That's when I want us to really step on the gas, because I don't think we can claim success until rents start to go down. They are, way above what people can afford. So I just want to know if you have, experience in past decades of having that conversation, that now the data is very clear. The more units of housing we build, especially densely developed, non-single family homes, we should see rents not only stabilize, but start to decrease and homelessness rates go down. And I don't want the market to start to tell us, whoa, like people are going to stop building housing because now they can't get premium rent prices.
So, over the decades I've done this, we have seen fluctuations in the market. We've seen hotter markets and cooler markets, and you're right about that. And certainly for market rate housing, when you meet demand, then you're going to see some cooling off. In terms of affordable housing, there's some basic costs built in to what it costs to rent a unit, like property taxes, like insurance, that whether you're a socially motivated landlord or a private sector landlord, you can't go below. The cost of maintenance and management. So if you're asking, will we see rents go down so much that the problem of homelessness would be alleviated? It's hard to imagine that without more intervention in the market, and we'll talk a little later about the importance of rental assistance to achieve that. But I have heard from, for instance, Alan Hunt, who was the longtime director of the Housing Finance Agency. I think he put in more than 20 years as a small landlord in Burlington, and he's reporting what you reporting, which is a year ago, he had people lining up when he had a vacancy, and today it's cooler than it was. So I think it's going to have some impact on the market, but in terms of people who make not very much money, There's a point below which rents can't go down because of the fixed cost of owning property. And I do think the other problem is, we're not seeing very much difference between, or if you're a private developer wanting to develop market rate housing, you want a return on your investment. So will people be more cautious if rents go down in terms of building market rate housing? I think they will. And then, so we're just in an unusual place that we have not been in before in terms of the construction market.
Also, just to tag on, I think that one of the challenges is we're building slowly enough so that the impact in those specific area markets is slow. I mean, if you had a slew of new housing units coming on board in Burlington tomorrow, it would be different than the trickle of number that we have coming online. So I would think the impact on that would be slower, just given the slow absorption of them into the market.
That could well be.
Yeah, anyway.
But that's a limiting factor in
Right.
terms of.
So Polly, the second chart on the right.
Is cost per, so I
Right.
touched on that, and we'll move ahead.
Right.
It was dangerous starting with data in this committee, because I don't
Yeah,
have
no,
much
no,
to
enjoy it, and because also we would love to address what people are earning, because I think we could actually do something about that, but I'm not sure the political climate at the moment would embrace.
And what that's really saying, and what this, so this chart here, you've seen several times, and you'll see several more times, this is data from the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, breaking down the housing need by what level of affordability it needs to be. And you see really on the rental side and also on the owner side, that huge need in the affordable at 80% AMI and below, and then at that 80 to 120 as well. Those are the areas where we really see that for those units to be produced, we need public subsidy to create those units, and it's a little more than half of what we need to meet our housing goals. I think Vermont cannot meet its housing targets without adding these affordable units, because our goal isn't to have a certain number of homes in the state. Our goal is to make sure the Vermont population is sustainably housed, and in order to do that, they need to afford the homes that they're living in. I know there's a lot of talk in here about area median income, and I just wanted to pause and take a moment to talk about what does that mean in terms of household income. So what I've actually, House General last year asked us to pull together this handout that I provided to you that breaks down what is
This one.
Yeah.
Which is,
so for
occupations.
we have a 3-person household, and then later on we have a 1-person household as well. And it says at these different affordability levels, so starting at 60% AMI, going up through 150% AMIs, these are very typically used thresholds in housing policy. What does that mean in terms of a income for a household? And what does that mean for a rent or home that they can afford? And I just wanted to leave you with that information so that you can see, as we're talking through the types of housing that VHCB and our partners support, these are units that are really housing Vermont's workforce and the growing sectors of Vermont's workforce. So I know I listened into when ACCD was in here talking about the intersection of housing and economic development and pointing to the huge growth that Beta anticipates seeing over the coming years, hiring a new technician every day for the next 2 years. And that those new technicians at a rate of $50,000 to $60,000 per year in Chittenden County, that's 60% AMI that is qualifying them to live in the affordable housing that CHT and other partners around the state are producing with VHCB support, and really at that income level are challenged in the market. So to support these.
I mean, I feel really strongly about keeping our eye on affordability, and AMI doesn't necessarily translate to affordability, right? So in Chittenden County now, a 2-adult, 2-child household needs $160,000 to pay all of their bills on time. So what I don't want us to do is sort of undersell how bad this crisis is just because people don't have the level of income needed to actually afford all of the costs that they're burdened with. I feel like we'll take our eye off of that affordability metric getting further and further away from people if we just treat AMI like the affordability metric. It's simply, it's 130,000 in the other counties that are not Chittenden County to pay all your bills on time. So
it'll be interesting to see what's included in both those figures.
well, AMI is just the average amount people make versus what you need to pay all of your bills on time and feel less stressed, which is like our middle class goal.
Right, and not paying more than 30% on housing.
I think what this is telling us, what the research here is telling us, is that there is a concentration of the highest number of households are on the lower end of the AMI spectrum, are faced by the hardest choices. They are also essential workers in our workforce. What have we been doing about it collectively? The legislature, the governor has really targeted a huge number of resources towards the development of housing. In the work that BHCB has been able to help fund, we've helped to serve over 5,600 households since 2020. And we're really proud of that number and know how much more there is to do. The legislature, you all have also asked us to really focus on a housing investment strategy that is diverse and meets the diverse needs of our housing market. And so you've asked us to invest in home ownership, in rental, in manufactured housing communities. And if you have interest there, we're happy to come back and talk about our work there, but also in special populations like farm worker housing, recovery residences, accessibility. And by spreading these investments across the housing spectrum, we have an average per unit investment across this time period of $80,000 per unit. And that's representing a large range from what it takes to build for the state portion of investment to build a new rental home, all the way down to what's it take to make a home accessible.
Can we go back to that? Unless you're going to pull out manufactured homes somewhere else.
Not this time.
Okay, I mean,
Come back.
it's interesting because it's like a low number of infill units, but the number of lots, that has got to be huge bang for your buck. That's like maybe the most affordable investment we're making in ownership. Because they own are they owning their lots through this?
No, generally they
In
own
some
the unit.
cases, they're owned by co-ops,
Okay,
and so they have ownership through the co-op, and in some cases, under the law, when a park comes up for sale, residents have a choice, and some have chosen to ask a nonprofit to become the owner of their park.
That's
Co-op.
But it's fair to say some of these are still owned by whoever. I mean,
People own their homes.
yeah, they own the home, but.
but if you're saying you've helped purchase 1,077 lots, that means those lots are now
that's units, I
owned
think.
cooperatively by a nonprofit.
What we're doing here is making investments that are helping to stabilize communities that might otherwise be lost. So we're often making infrastructure investments
Okay.
in parks where you might
Okay.
lose that, but for the improvement of the sewer
That
system,
bridge
the
or that
electric
road.
system, the
Okay.
water system, et cetera.
When you make those improvements, are you seeing a majority of those communities become nonprofits or self-governing?
Yes, they're, by our statute, that's who we invest in.
Okay,
That's
okay.
So those are all owned by nonprofit. All those 1,000 units are either in nonprofit
Yeah.
ownership or cooperative ownership.
That's pretty good for stable affordability. Really good.
Just because you've entrusted us to steward a significant amount of investment, we're happy to report that there's only one project that still has ARPA dollars that's yet to be completed. It's getting completed in downtown Burlington next month and we'll disperse the final $3 million of that $119 million appropriation. And what that also did was it brought another $260 million into the state of other sources to pay for that housing construction. And it created and preserved 1,000 units on the nose. Nice round number.
Yeah.
And the benefit of those 1,000 units is gonna be felt for a long time in the state. We've been talking about how affordability is getting more and more out of reach for Vermont households. And as we enter really difficult economic times, I think we're really fortunate that the state created so many units in the last several years that will help sustain people far into the future. Some housing strategies that we focus on, and I know Champlain Housing Trust was here talking about Bay Ridge, and I also want to make sure Gus has time to present, so I'm not going to dwell on it. But creating new neighborhoods, really allowing us to leverage funds, housing for intellectual and developmental disabilities. These are all strategies that we've been able to explore, and I'll go into a little greater depth there.
Since a lot of people are going to use this picture, I just need people to know Congresswoman Bowne and I were sharing the scissors and could not cut the ribbon. Like I've never been, it was like a nightmare ribbon cutting scenario. Like everyone else to cut the ribbon and we were like, our scissors don't work.
They are
We finally got it.
There's metaphor in there that I won't go into. And we've also touched on the work in St. Albans, but also in South Burlington. This is where Gus was talking about that initial investment in affordable housing is helping unlock additional private investment and really transforming communities. Investments of this scale will be harder to make. This sort of neighborhood transformation will be harder to make without sustained revenue for housing. I want to dwell a little bit on leverage, a topic we get to talk to you folks about a lot, and that's because I know the cost of creating rental housing is something that keeps us up at night. It is way too high. It is still growing. And yet we need to do it. We need to create homes for those households in Vermont that are struggling. And so it is fortunate that in the affordable housing finance system, the state dollars stewarded by VHCB do not need to pay for the whole $600,000 roughly per unit. What our investment is able to do is leverage other sources, be they the low-income housing tax credits, other federal sources, conventional debt, to help make up the balance of the cost. So what you're looking at here in the pie charts, the blue is the state dollars, and then the orange, that's the low-income housing tax credit. You see the smaller source there. So I just really wanted to emphasize how state investment through VHCB is not paying for the full cost of that unit. What it is doing is it unlocking other dollars that are coming into the state.
And there, it also is an illustration of the difference between the 9% credits and the 4% credits, which Maura has talked about often in this committee.
Right, and you know, the great value of the 4% credits is that they are virtually unlimited to Vermont, and the downfall of them is that they raise half the equity that the 9% credits raise, but the 9% we get an allocation every year from the feds. Once it's gone, it's gone. So one of the things that we were asked to do through the pandemic was to leverage more 4% credits because the crunch was so deep.
Right.
And we put more dollars into those units to bring that private capital to Vermont.
This is showing the same thing, but on a project by project basis with a sample of projects, again, really small text. What you have here is the per unit cost, the blue is those VHCB state funds, the yellow other leverage dollars that are coming in. And so what you're seeing is the most expensive types of projects are those rental housing development or often home ownership projects, but that the state investment is fairly equal, whether we're talking all the way over on the right in a shelter bed versus a rental unit versus home ownership. While it is more expensive to build a home than to create a shelter bed, the cost to the state is roughly the same. And so as we're looking at what is our strategy, permanent housing, transitional housing, shelter, I want to look at that policy question, thinking about what is the cost of the state, what does it take to move these strategies forward, and it is pretty steady across the board.
Interesting. And actually kind of higher, that shelter on the left is higher than almost any other investment you're making.
And it is because there aren't those major sources like the low-income housing tax credits that can come in and help support it.
Right.
That's a hotel conversion. Move past this, we touched on the 4% tax credits. the investments the state put into housing unlocked this source that we were not able to use in the past and will not be able to use as much in the future without state investment, continued state investments in housing.
And is that, given the changes at the federal level, is that differentiated 9%, 4%, and what we get for it continuing, or do you see a change in that coming down?
That is a great question for VHFA. I will say that the reconciliation package that passed over the summer had some good news on the low-income housing tax credit front. It actually increased the number of this valuable 9% credits to housing development and to Vermont. So we have more resources there a little bit, and it had some policy changes around the 4% as well. So it's promising to see the federal government lead into this housing source.
Yes, so we're seeing more will be here next.
I was gonna say, like, you know, when we did Bay Ridge, HUD came, you know, like we got to celebrate that our federal partners were still there and with us. And I see that continuing in certain housing markets and programs, you know, that is still important to this administration.
One of the positive changes that the Fed's made in the 4% credits was to issue guidance around an arcane thing called income averaging. But what income averaging meant was that usually with a tax credit unit, you're capped at 60% of median for eligibility. With income averaging, they let you go to 80% for some units as long as you had other units that were going to be affordable at 50% median. So that has broadened the range of people who are eligible for tax credit units.
I know you've heard from the Disabilities Council on the Road to Housing report, and Chair, you served on the committee that came up with that report. VHCB has been working with the parents group to help develop housing out of the pilot that was initially stood up by the legislature, and we're excited to continue to do this work.
Well, we will hope to continue to invest in that.
Yeah, I will say we do have an application for the second building at the Montville site.
Oh, great.
That we're considering now, so they're continuing
Great.
to be active, and we've had partnerships between lots of our housing providers and the parents groups around the state or some of the designated agencies, because they don't have the real estate experience. So Downstreet has been involved in 2 projects, Wyndham Windsor in 1, CHT in another.
One small program that we have the pleasure of running with the Community Loan Fund is working with the CTE centers around the state to help provide them capital to get their students out on job sites, building housing. And the thing that really helped this project take off was a partnership with the Habitat chapters around the state who have been.
This was the 15 million we invested in 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. How much is left of the 15?
Fair amount. I mean, there's only 9 projects out there right now, so, but more and more of the CTE centers are getting with the idea that this is a good source to use.
And this is employing CTE students during the summer mostly, right?
No, it's their year-round project, but one of the things that the fund is eligible to use is to employ the CTE students in the summer. Should
Yeah, that's what I
choose to
thought.
want to.
Right.
Yes.
And this is the governor out on the very first project up in Newport, helping the students with that here. Guys, I'm gonna turn it over to you. A couple minutes late.
No, we're doing fine. So, you all know we have a dual mission, and recently the Stowe Land Trust brought us a project in Morristown to conserve 150 acres and convert 8 vacation homes back to year-round residences. And we said, that's really exciting. They partnered with Downstreet on the single-family end of it. 6 of the homes will be made permanently affordable, 2 will just be market rate housing. But I think what I wanted to focus on in this part of the presentation is we see the value of shared equity as a great fiscally conservative approach that does help build wealth, does get people into home ownership who would otherwise not become homeowners, but also has great potential for the state's investment to grow over time. I walked into the offices of the Champlain Housing Trust last spring, and they were advertising these 3 homes for sale that we had subsidized some time ago. And I'll just talk about the one in the middle because it's in Essex, and I remember clearly when we bought from UVM, actually the HFA bought from UVM what was called Officers Row, the parade ground. Across from the parade grounds, the conservation easement on the parade grounds. It's permanent open space for that neighborhood. And then converted the houses along Officers Row into 60 condominiums, 30 permanently affordable. When we did that back in the early 90s, our investment was about $15,000 per unit. So what you see here is one of those units up for resale close to 30 years after originally opened, had an original purchase price somewhere around $90,000, and you look up the details, we had an investment of $15,000 to bring that cost down to about $75,000 at that time. So today, it has a market value of almost $400,000, and the public subsidy, what you see represented there is CHD investment, grew from $15,000 to $170,000, and that allowed them to sell it to a new homeowner at $222,000. And so, without us having to put another nickel in, we have done about a little over 1,400 homes like this all over the state. They've been owned now to more than 2,100 households because of the recycling of the public subsidy.
And there's also a great profit sharing for improvements, right? Like then you
Yes.
don't, you're not
Yes,
handing people like this
Right.
project.
people get some of their, share their equity with the public, but if they make improvements to their homes, qualified improvements, they get 100% of the value of those. We just looked at 55 resales, which happened over about the last year. Our average investment in those homes, which span the time that we've been around, was about $27,000. The average growth in the investment when the home was resold was $136,000. The average buyer was in the low 80s and about 83% median. So we think this is one of the things that we think really works well.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to keep investing year after year. And I think when Holly presented at the beginning, we talked about the value of permanent affordability as a policy for the law. And the goal is to not displace people. The goal is to preserve the community wealth here. Obviously, we're just underway with the last few condominiums across from the junior high school and high school in Woodstock. We did a few units a few years ago, and we're back again. And in a market like Woodstock without permanent affordability, you'd invest once to get into somebody in home ownership, and then you'd have to keep investing at a deeper level to keep it up.
Where our average price now is about $750 to $800.
So as we think about what we need to focus on, what we need
So
to,
sorry, Gus, these are on the market now for how much?
I'm gonna have to get back to you on the specific numbers.
Yeah, I
I
can't
can't remember, but it's low to mid twos.
Yeah.
The picture here is of another one of those catalytic projects, Stonecrop Meadows in Middlebury, where the anchor funding for both 6 single-family homes and a 30-some unit rental development is spurring a 250-unit neighborhood. But as we get into the rest of the presentation, we wanted to talk about areas of focus for DHCD and areas of focus for all of you. So we see the need for cost containment wherever we can figure out how to do it. We just had a board retreat. We invited in both one of our most skilled and recently retired architects and 2 builders, along with some other folks, just to talk to us about the market and the market forces that they're dealing with. The reality is that, the major costs in construction are being found in materials and labor. It is a very good thing that the people who build housing for us are making more money than they ever have before, but it is a problem for us that it costs so much, and that costs over the course of, since we did the housing revenue bond, have about doubled to build housing. So Governor Scott proposed a housing revenue bond, and he used to talk about it regularly. We talked about $37 million generating a $200 million investment in 800 homes, and $37 million today would probably generate an investment in about 300 homes, because it's gotten so much more expensive. So we are focused on cost containment. One of the things the panelists told us is that we have a severe labor shortage in Vermont, and when we are competing for labor, we're competing for labor for people who are building luxury homes. And so until we change that demographic, I think that's why you invested in the CTE program. We're going to continue to face that as a problem. We will have increased pressures on the cost of materials, whether they are related to tariffs or the Build America, Buy America provisions that come with a lot of federal funds. There's actually talk in Washington now, and we're part of advocacy groups asking them to suspend MABA for a variety of reasons, including that HUD can't move quickly enough on waivers for things that are not made in the United States, can't be found here, but also because it's just raising costs.
You just used the term luxury homes. I'm curious, do you see the distinction between luxury homes and vacation homes or second homes, so to speak?
I'm not good at making that distinction. I know of somebody in our office has a family member in the construction trades whose family was asked to bid on a home in Stowe that was going to cost north of $30 million. Is that a luxury home, a second home, or both? I can't tell you. I'm just saying. I was sitting in the other body a couple of years ago, and Representative Parsons said, "Well, in my neck of the woods, you can't find anybody to build the homes because they're busy building a $4 million home down the road from me." So it's a small labor pool. We have not had growth in it. It's aging. It's a good thing we have, air guns today instead of everybody having to wear their shoulders out with hammers. But it's an aging workforce. I know how many of my friends who built houses in the 80s, 90s, and aughts who are my age, and they don't want to. They're happy to build a cabinet at a slow pace in their garage or their workshop, but they don't want to be pounding nails for anymore.
Is there,
Yeah.
how closely are you watching with the Fed discussions and interest rates and like volatility and unpredictability over the next year?
The biggest policy related to the cost of housing is interest rates. One of the things that, again, we get to the issue of cost containment. At the beginning of the pandemic, construction loans cost around 3%. They got as high as 9%. So if you were building a project and were expecting in 2021 to borrow 9%, and you got in the ground in 22 or 23, and all of a sudden the construction loan was 9%, that was a piece of the cost escalation. Obviously, for a first-time home buyer, if we could go back to being able to borrow at under 4% instead of that near 6%, that would be a great thing in terms of the affordability of housing. So,
But time and delays are a factor now.
absolutely.
Things could only get worse.
And as we talk about areas of focus, we have a number of things here that we'll talk about: appeals, corrective action plans, which I think we just got a report on what may be possible in terms of regulatory reform, and then finally rental assistance. Right. So.
Maybe not
Yeah,
today,
Thomas.
but I'd love if any documentation you have on appeals, recommendations, changes that you all would definitely support and advocate for, because that I'm trying to understand and get my hands around what just recently was presented to us, and also what you'd like to see in that area, but maybe not today. It's a follow-up.
And so on appeals, we are taking it up first in the Senate. It's going to begin in natural resources and come to us. We'll have equal time with it. We heard the LURB's presentation of their recommendations, and then we will also be hearing, I know there are a lot of people who've been working and have additional recommendations. So that's coming out.
Thanks.
Just add to that, one of the major problems in building housing is the process for approval of permitting. And so any thoughts that you might have to share with us on how can the permitting process be speeded up? What's happening right now? What are the roadblocks that are in fact tackleable? And what recommendations would you have in that area?
So we'll talk about the Putney project in a minute, and I'll try to address all those issues today, offline with you,
And continue.
or whenever you have us back in.
Right.
To speak to, first, as we look at costs, whether you're a nonprofit developer or a for-profit developer, costs are aligning in the market from what we've seen, from what we're hearing. We do require competitive bidding. We are gonna focus more and more on how do we simplify design? How do we repeat design? A lot of communities want buildings to look like what you see at Putney Landing here, which I believe are duplexes, really nice design. The building below is across from Walmart here in Berlin. It's what's called a double loaded corridor building. It is a simpler design. It is a little less expensive,
But a lot less attractive.
but less attractive. So one of the dilemmas we have as funders, that our partners have as developers, and that you have because you have constituents, is your constituents usually want the nicer looking product.
But to integrate into the communities they're going into.
Yeah, and if you looked at the other side of the building, it actually, the entryway is not quite so plain Jane. But there are other issues around design that are problematic. We have found in housing people who have lots of challenges that the more people share things like hallways and common entrances, as opposed to having their own entrances, the more there's opportunity for conflict. So for distressed populations, more expensive design sometimes is called for. But we will encourage simple design wherever we can. There are ways to break up and make buildings like the one on the bottom more attractive, but it does save money.
You know, that I love listening to the architect out of New York City. I think his name is Krishna Chakravarti, who did the spread on how much more New York could build if they let go of, some of the regulations, about 500,000 units. And one of the cases he makes as an architect is that shared stairwells and hallways actually limit loneliness and isolation. And one of the biggest problems we have in the state is that people can die without anybody knowing that they're gone for days.
I think you have to balance that though with the other challenges that.
Well, I just want to say, I don't want to completely disregard that. As I mentioned to CHT, my husband is the reason we know someone was picked up by ICE who doesn't have any family. So, I don't want to discount that maybe shared entryways create conflict, but they're also the only way we build community in this day and age.
And then shared community spaces by those entrances.
Completely agree with you. All I was saying is, as we try to house people, when you've asked us to in statute, who have serious variety of issues, for some of them interacting with their neighbors is more problematic. And while you can create common courtyards and other ways of bringing people together, sometimes an individual entryway reduces conflict in some circumstances. In general, I think you'll see.
We have about 6 minutes. So we're
6
gonna
minutes.
keep moving.
Well, I'm gonna keep.
Because you're gonna come back, but this is
Okay,
one.
so you have a report that you asked DEC, I believe, or AR to give you on corrective action plans. What I can tell you that I hear regularly from developers is that it takes 12 to 18 months to get through getting an approved corrective action plan, and that's just too long. This is a site we're now working on in Newport. And so anything we can do that helps AMR speed that process up, I would say 6 months ought to be long enough. We should be doing.
Will you be presenting that to Senate Natural Resources as well? I want that committee to hear what you just said.
I'd be happy.
Okay.
And yeah, I would also say to you that the Home Act had positive impact on increased height and density. This is a building under construction in Waterbury right now. For those of us old enough to remember, Rusty Parker was the site of his home. Yeah. It was at WDV. And the town of Waterbury initially turned it down, and because we passed the Home Act, and then they looked at the requirements, and they said, oh, we do have to allow a building of this massing and this height. So I'm big on growing vertically wherever we can, and doing as much infill development as we can.
And we will point out, that's not that high.
Is there a cap on how vertical? Because I heard South Burlington talking about possibly 14-story buildings in the U-Mall parking lot. I'm not against it, but I'm just curious, are you as high as we can go?
I do think that, there's some room for communities to have debates about how tall. I have a good friend who's been opposed to tall buildings in Burlington, and I think he's all wet.
No, this is an issue with the hula and this and
So-
height issues.
The tallest building in the state is Rutland at 14 stories or 13 stories. Oh, really? This isn't like a famous statistic. I always pass that building and I'm like, there it is. the tallest building.
Is that 10?
No, I mean, Burlington has 12-story buildings. They're just in valleys more than on hills. So it really depends what height metric you're using.
So, regulatory reform, you passed Act 181. I hope that that's gonna make it easier. I think when we get to the question of appeals, there's lots to be said about that, more than I can say in the 5 minutes remaining, but I think the more we can have fights in the permitting process and then restrict the right to appeal, the better. What happened in Putney was that the community decided to seek a village designation because they wanted more designated and have more housing in their village. That had to be approved by the Regional Planning Commission, who then sent the recommendation to a state body that also approved it. It then spent 2.5 years and 3 years making 2 trips to the Supreme Court because a single person had the right to say, I don't think we should have 25 units at that site. That the whole community had agreed, the Regional Planning Commission agreed, and the state agreed it was a great place for Vermont to grow. So I think, to get to your question, we need, in those kinds of instances where we said this is where we want to grow, to make it harder for individuals to.
So we've asked for that now in several spots to greenlight things once certain permits have been approved, once certain planning processes.
But we have some cleanup to do.
Yeah.
We have more to do. We still have to do the hard work of changing hearts and minds. So the building in Greensboro was offered to our partners at Rural Edge. They went through a long period. They got a lot of community opposition. And ultimately, the select board was asked to put it to a town vote, and they lost 60-40. So the opportunity is gone, the expense was
I
incurred.
guess I'm just not sure why something like that goes to a vote in the first place.
That's the select board's decision.
Well, that was the select board's decision. If you were on the
But
select.
what is the trigger decision there?
It was a town building, and the voters said to them,
Don't
don't.
fill this town
Don't fill
bill. Leave
in
it
the
empty.
house.
It's empty still though, right?
I don't know quite what they're doing with it. I just know the building has lots of issues in it that have been neglected for many years.
Yeah, that's part of it.
I do want to talk about the value of rental assistance. I'm sure at some point you'll hear from Kathleen Burke. I heard a member of the other chair in the other body speaking about the need. We're losing ground on the availability of rental assistance in the state. We had 3 projects that lost 22 project-based vouchers, and that meant that they could borrow less, and they then, in order to get those 92 homes built, added $1.3 million into those 3 developments because those vouchers were lost. So anything you can do that would stem the loss of vouchers
Well, we're working on it in the BAA.
would be deeply appreciated. But the point I'm trying to make here is that it's not just important for people like the woman who is pictured here and testified last year, who had an auto accident that led to a traumatic brain injury that led to becoming homeless, and we did a hotels to housing, and along with a voucher, she is rehoused. That's really important, but I'm also saying it has an impact on housing development, because when there's rental assistance, a developer can borrow more money and need less of ours. So
I think we need landlord risk mitigation too. There's just only so much control we have over whether or not people will rent. And we need to look at that problem. Even, I mean, it's easy to take our Section 8 vouchers away if they're so underutilized because people are afraid of how entangled they can get in a difficult situation that affects their other tenants.
We agree.
Yeah,
That's
keep
going,
going, sorry.
Give you 3 slides that go to your economic development mission very quickly. We have a program called the Rural Economic Development Initiative. We provide grant writing support to small towns and to businesses in small towns, sometimes doing infrastructure, sometimes converting a building. This one in Bridgewater is now going to become daycare, childcare facility, sometimes helping a business like Maplebrook Mozzarella to an expansion through a value-added producer grant. We've invested $1 million. The next time you see numbers here of what we've leveraged, it's going to be pushing past $28 million because we helped a lot of communities apply for disaster recovery funding. So great technical assistance program. We have a small business program for farmers that we work with, and you can see the numbers here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but on your way north, for those of you who go north, you can get off. This is at the intersection of Route 2 and 100B. These are folks who with development rights to help them get on their farm, expand their farm, and then did business planning and help them open this wonderful market there. Good return on investment for rural communities and for rural businesses. I will not dwell because of time. And then finally, when we do conservation work, we are thinking about the rural economy a lot. Now the Scutney, Kingdom Trails, both were interested in our support for mountain biking. We helped revitalize with the help of a new nonprofit, Prospect Mountain, which is the second highest cross-country skiing facility in the state. It's about a 10-minute ride from downtown Bennington. And some of you may have heard the news of our work with Vermont Adaptive last week, but they will now have a permanent home helping veterans and others who are disabled enjoy outdoor sports with their first permanent home. They have adaptive programs both at Sugar Bush and at Killington, and be based permanently in Rochester. And it's grateful for Vermont for veterans as well.
That'd be a nice field trip.
So just to get back to our pipeline, this is the proposed Hula building that CHT talked to you about last week. Again, the sort of catalytic investment where we would be involved in some units and market units would also get built.
So few stories now. It's like 7, 6. Good God.
I mean, plus the ground floor.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't get me wrong. Huge fan of this project, huge priority. But I have been trying to work out a session on ways we can say when we invest, you cannot keep reducing the number of stories, thereby increasing the cost per unit.
Exactly.
Especially they're going above and beyond with additional affordable percentage above and beyond what Burlington requires.
But what I do want to say that you should be aware of is that we have, as Polly said a few minutes ago, we have the very last ARPA project that'll be completed in another 60 days and occupied in Burlington. We have other projects that will continue to get built out through 27, but you're going to begin to see a big drop off in affordable housing development beyond that. And what I would say to you is that last year the legislature was able to give us a little over $8 million in one-time funding. We had about $12 million through earmarks from our congressional delegation. So our capacity without increased revenue will get decreased, and our production will go down, and the catalytic impact that we can have in projects like the Hula project, which we have not yet considered but is coming to us, will be diminished. So anything you can do, I understand the second half of bienniums are never great times to ask for more funding or more revenue, but anything you can do that keeps the momentum forward will, from our perspective, be a very positive thing.
Thank you. Much appreciated. We have that bell on our wall. So we will certainly be taking it up soon. Thank you. We'll have you back. More to follow. Thank you for that. And thank you for your, the priorities for this year. We appreciate them when they align, with many of ours, as you already know. So, this is really helpful, and we will have you back in a more targeted fashion ASAP, but thank you for sort of.
And I just
Right.
echo, I hope you get into natural resources soon, and we talk about density algorithms and bonuses when you're doing affordable housing and environmental development to go upward. There's nothing more environmental and climate forward than building up in places that transportation and infrastructure, which the Woola project does.
The last thing, just Senator Brock's question about the appeals process. Everything I know about going to court is that it's expensive. It takes a long time. So I personally have talked in the past about creating something that New Hampshire has, which is a Housing Board of Appeals, where they have 6 months and the Housing Board has to make decisions. I don't think there's a way for you to mandate how quickly the judiciary moves. So I think you need to look at that. I know that will be highly controversial. But I think we need to, once you go to court, you're in a swamp.
Court costs.
An expensive swamp.
But the LURB didn't say we would keep it to 3 months or 6
No, but
months.
that's,
No, but you have
that's the
to
beginning
work,
of that.
you can dictate the verb and
Absolutely.
If we're not dictating to them, though, I don't think we're adding any value.
So we're beginning that work this week or early next, so
But one thing
that will be.
I would go beyond that, and I would look at the part of the process that involves the inspection and approval of items, where I see so often, it seems to be sequential rather than simultaneous.
That's in my bill.
I agree with you, and again, as I said earlier, I think how we figure out how to limit when a project can be appealed, when we've all agreed.
Yeah.
This is a place we want to grow, would also be very beneficial, but we probably can't get rid of all appeal rights, so.
We can certainly,
quicker
we can certainly have some effect on them. Thank you very much. We'll switch to Megan, and we'll have, welcome back the chamber now with their housing priorities. Gus and Polly, thank you so much. Your partnership is just one of our pillars that we lean on and build our housing work on, so thank you so much.
So the tallest building in Vermont is
In Rutland.
the Grace Congregational Church, not the residential. The tallest residential building is in Burlington.
I thought you got that white building.
Burlington Square South Tower.
But the tallest by actual height is the one in Rutland.
No, that's fine.
But not the building base to the building top.
We can check.
The amount it is up in the air.
I see it better in the air.
I know. I'm like, yeah.
I like the fact that it's Grace, because Grace is in Rutland, isn't it? Yeah. Great concert there this weekend for those of you who are listening, Friday night, Vivaldi, Four Seasons. Just saying.
Good morning.
Good morning, Megan. Welcome back.
Thank you. Megan Sullivan, Vice President of Government Affairs for the Vermont Chamber of Commerce. Thank you all for having us back. This is not my first time being in this committee. Sorry, I'm adjusting to reading glasses still. To talk about housing, but I just wanted to say that we really appreciate being able to participate in this conversation. We are not a housing organization. We know there are a lot of housing organizations in the state that you can hear from, but we do represent employers and folks from across the state in lots of different industries, and all of them point to housing as a major impediment to their ability to grow in Vermont, to attract a workforce, to retain workforce. So we have joined this conversation over the last 4 to 5 years, and hope that I'm able to share a few things today. And I can rely on our great housing organizations in the state to sort of give you data, give you the pictures, what's going on. What I would like to do is just point to some really specific programs that we think are working well, some challenges that we still see, and see if there's progress that can be made this year. If we don't talk about certain things, it doesn't mean we don't support them. I know Let's Build Homes will be in here, and there are a lot of things that they're working on that we're also supportive of, but just wanted to highlight some things that we've seen recently and feedback that we've gotten from our members. I think first off is that over the last 5 years with the federal funding that the state has received, there have been some pretty innovative programs that have come through this committee, that have come through the state, as ways to create housing. I'm not sure that the state would have created these programs without the availability of those federal funds, right? It can take some of that risk away. And I think that paid off. So first off, I would just say, let's keep that spirit of innovation going. The federal funding is no more. State funding is a challenge, but I think that innovation has showed that the spirit of Vermonters can really create some phenomenal opportunities to create housing. And one that I really want to highlight is VHIP. And I know the department will talk about all of the different metrics, how many units, where, and all of that VHIP has created. To me, one of the most phenomenal successes of VHIP is bringing new builders into the market. One thing that Vermont has really struggled with is we've seen the number of people involved in home development and home building diminish. We have sort of a strong affordable housing community and a strong luxury housing community, but those folks who can develop sort of the everyday house for our smaller communities, the triplexes, the quadplexes, was missing. VHIP has invested in over 500 or 600 different builders through that program, and
It's a whole range.
it's a whole range of people who have gotten into home development through using VHIP as sort of a launching point to take some of that risk away of saying, okay, what if I turn this one unit? What would I need to know to be able to turn this one piece, one apartment into something that's viable for someone to live in? Jonah Richards, who we all sort of highlight as a great rural housing developer, his first unit was through the VHIP program.
Right.
So it's pretty exciting to see what is happening through that program, and these small scale developers are coming through VHIP from Bennington County to Franklin County. It's really hitting across the state. So that's one piece of the program that I think I really like to highlight because it's hitting such an important piece of our workforce in housing development.
And the unit price is, of course, so attractive.
The unit price is attractive. The bang for the buck that the state gets for the investment there is significant.
On average, 39,000 a unit.
Yeah. It is going to struggle to keep that program going without it moving into base funding.
Right.
One-time
Well, that's-
funds.
Again, hopefully it's something we can get
Yeah.
with the revenue.
So we would support VHIP becoming a permanent base funded program so that we can make sure the people are in place to move that forward.
Thank you.
In order to make sure that those state dollars were invested are going far enough, we still need to look at what's happening, where are the challenges in the regulatory environment, and where are things that I think you all have done well, maybe not being implemented as well as intended, where there may need to be some technical changes. I'm going to start with Act 181. We were part of the coalition that supported the passage of Act 181. We were on board from the first group working on the updates to Act 250 modernization right through the passage in every committee hearing. I can't even imagine how many hours sitting there, and believe in the opportunities to move Act 250 from purely a size-based jurisdiction to something that takes into account size and location in order to see more housing get built in smart growth areas and make sure critical natural resources of statewide importance are getting the review that they need. I am worried with some of, as we're seeing how things are playing out, that maybe those legislative intents that I at least saw, and I think others as part of that group saw going through the process, are not playing out as we expected, and think there should be some technical corrections made to ensure that this bill does, this act does meet its full potential. Tier 1, we're hearing the adoption is lower than expected. At the same time, I believe you already heard from the RPCs about some of the challenges they see as they're mapping areas, that maybe those growth areas are being looked at to be smaller than what they saw. I think the intent of the mapping of tier 1 is that every community has access to these exemptions.
That was written into
Yes.
the law.
And when we're saying, how do we ensure that every community is treated equitably, it doesn't mean we add regulation to communities so that those other communities are equally as regulated. It's giving all of those communities opportunity. So if folks aren't looking at tier 1A as an opportunity, understanding why, what are the holdups? What we're hearing is a lot of hesitation around inheriting existing Act 250 permit conditions. That the municipality,
They have to,
the municipality,
that each community would have to take on monitoring and overseeing those, and I've heard that the reason they aren't is because they don't want to do that.
they don't want to do that.
And so how can we help?
Right.
And South Burlington would like to come in and talk about that, but also I don't want it to be that we're back to the developer litigating Act 250 with the LURB and managing their own municipal process also. Tier 1A was supposed to end conversations about the land use in those areas, that land use is housing, commercial, economic.
And that is a key point too. I feel like that the commercial industrial piece is not getting enough attention. And the whole point of those 1A areas is that it should be places where people can live and work and regional hubs. And if we're only thinking about 1A in terms of housing and not thinking about, okay, where is that part of the town that it may be next to where the housing is, that may be next to the commercial center where there may be industrial growth. I think we need to do more to be looking at not just where we historically grown, but where do we need to grow over the next 20 years and be open to letting towns be more part of that conversation. At the same time, hearing that 1B may not be taken up, I think understanding again, where is the concern for the communities? Is it just that, a project that size, they would prefer to have the state input on? As long as it's not, we don't want that housing in our community, so we're gonna say no to 1B. We would support, which we did 2 years ago, this 1B moving from an opt-in to an opt-out. And that if communities do not take the 1B, then priority housing projects are still allowed in those areas.
I think we should recognize that 1A is going to be your commercial and economic corridors. And 1B was supposed to be where we get a lot of housing. And if that doesn't happen, our bills were not affected.
And this was a huge bill that went through a lot of change in the last 2 weeks. It should be expected that we are going to need a technical correction to say,
That's why we're here.
how do we make sure?
Technical correction.
Technical correction.
Technical, this is a big technical.
Yeah.
Opt-in, opt-out is a big technical correction.
Tier 3, we also need to ensure we're really talking about natural resources of statewide significance. We know we've just seen one draft, we're expecting another draft, but I think that first draft had a lot of people rightfully really concerned, especially in our rural areas, where you've created a road rule that's supposed to incentivize building close to the road.
Right.
And then you put tier 3 close to the road, you basically told that area, you're in if you're next to the road, you're in if you're away from the road, you're in regardless. We have lost the incentive.
In tier 3, in a no-go zone, not in.
Right, well, tier 3, not a no-go,
It's not no-go.
but it is automatic. Well, it's not even supposed to be automatic. The other
Yeah.
piece is, I heard plenty of times during the conversation, tier 3 is not, we are not looking for Huntingtons here. That's not the target. 200 square feet is the trigger. I don't know a hunting camp that is smaller than 200 square feet. So I would say that is a direct move away from the legislative intent there.
Karen Horn sent a really compelling letter
Karen Horn,
this
yeah.
evening to
Karen
all of
Horn
us.
said
And VLCT
okay.
has
Haven't-
some good maps that they can show of where that concern is.
Yeah.
We are expecting a new draft. I hope the new draft addresses those challenges.
And the
that have been
public
raised.
comment, they have had public
They
comment.
won round on the first draft, now another
Now
draft
on
is
this,
coming.
Right.
But I think there were a lot of pretty big questions between the first draft and the second draft. I think stakeholder input is gonna be really important to make sure this gets right, and I hope that that timeframe that they're under is enough to get that input and to make sure that this is rolling out well. The other thing I want to highlight is we are hearing concerns from people who are involved in development in the state about how the district coordinators, how it is to work with them. Certainly when we say that part of Act 250's problem is reputational, is because there can be some adversarial relationships. We supported a 5-person professional board specifically because I was under the impression that there needed to be more support to do this sort of deferred maintenance on the training to ensure that this program was being administered fairly and predictably across the state. I'm hearing it's getting worse, not better.
That's the exact opposite of what we're
concerning.
working with the district
Yeah.
coordinator, you're right.
That isn't necessarily within the legislative purview to deal with. I mean, that's a cultural
Something we
issue,
can
but I
raise
think
for
it's something that
discussion.
needs to be raised. And it's something that we are raising as well.
Right, every time I hear about something, it should mean that we're spending time clarifying in favor of our original intent. So we've heard that with subdivisions and all kinds of things that really just create more work for us or delay and deny the intent of what we'd already passed, and that's very frustrating.
And I think, some of what we see is around redevelopment projects too, that can be especially frustrating if someone is doing a redevelopment project rather than building in a greenfield. The state should be saying, how can we help you? How do we get this done? And roadblock after roadblock, cost after cost are being incurred that have folks saying to me, why am I doing this? This is such a huge amount of money for a redevelopment project. I could go to New Hampshire, do this project in a greenfield, no problem. And it's challenging for me to keep trying to say, no, stay in Vermont, commit to Vermont. We want you here. We want that redevelopment project here. I think a cultural shift, especially around redevelopment projects, is going to be important. When we talk about the cleanup plan that Gus brought up, I'm already spacing on the name, but I mean, we've got to be encouraging that work to happen.
Absolutely, but I just want to say, in terms of these concerns, how is the chamber registering these concerns with Alert?
I have registered these concerns with Alert. We're working on setting up a meeting with some folks in the administration and some of the developers that we've heard from, and inviting Alert to participate in that on the cultural piece, especially, and how things are going.
Can you give just a couple of more specific examples of what you're referring to? Because in terms of the nature of the problem, like a specific kind of problem that you hear repeatedly.
Right, where the redevelopment might be, and then Keisha has a question.
Yeah, so do you mean like with the relationship challenges, right? Well, of
The district coordinator and maybe the
right.
redevelopment, both examples.
I just like to get a feel for
Yeah.
what exactly that means.
It means, getting sort of pretty terse responses, getting incomplete letters when you've put in a lot of work, after incomplete letter. When we're looking at some of the documents that people have showed to us, getting into minutia that seems like outside of the scope of what we're supposed to be looking at. Before things even get to the commission, right, where the commission's supposed to be able to make some of these determinations, it's trying to get through to the staff. And we know there's been work to address this by bringing in roving coordinators to help with the backlog. And we're just not hearing that is helping. And I'm not sure folks would want me to get into really specifics, but on tape here, but happy to send you some of those specifics that we've heard from.
So it's meant the district coordinators were hopefully helping things be easier and better coordinated and more consistent around the state, preparing to go to the district commission. Is that right?
Yeah.
So that would be
right.
an easier process and more consistent process with the district commissions. So you're finding that, and then if you just give Brandy a redevelopment example, and then we'll go to Keisha's question. Of a project that.
Yeah,
you
project,
see being
and
challenged.
this is a, Subaru dealership in Rutland, who is redeveloping a contaminated site, to have a larger dealership. I will say, car dealerships provide a lot of revenue to the state. And so taking a redevelopment project and slowing it down by 2 years is a lot of lost revenue, as well as leaving a blighted property undeveloped and getting folks who are pretty large supporters of their community frustrated about, why are we here?
Well, I mean, I just have.
Yeah.
Tough back 2 years, I mean, work has only been in action for 6 months.
No,
so
this is
how
the,
does
this is the, this is
Oh,
the
the district.
Suburb,
Yeah,
it's,
yeah.
right.
2
So
years is not.
but what we're hoping is that relationships change, right? As we have 5 professionals here, that some of this work, and I know how much work they have on their plates. But then some of this work is getting down to, okay, let's make sure we all have the same understanding of how this criteria should be, interpreted.
Applied into it, let's go to
Okay.
Keisha, because you've got.
I know, and I got big things to get through.
Yeah.
I just want to say, I welcome, I don't like having to speak to our intent. But I have written letters to district coordinators when they are clearly, not following a bill we had just passed, a law we had just changed, and the spirit of what we've tried to accomplish. I think we all need to be talking to our districts, and I think we should have some of our district coordinators and district commissioners in, because there is certainly a minority report as well from a lot of district commissioners who feel like they want things to move faster, and I can bring some of those folks in.
Let's chat about that.
Kristen Sultan, who's now on the LERB, was always like the standout district coordinator. I mean, anytime I would
So
hear,
sure, no.
so, I think she will be, when that time is allotted, she will be a great person to be doing this training.
Okay.
Okay, the Home Act, there's a couple of things that have been raised. The definition of served by water and sewer not being applied consistently. So a town where water is on one side of the street, sewer is on the other side of the street, saying you're not served by water and sewer because it's on the other side of the right of way. So maybe some clarification there, that served by water and sewer does not mean it has to be on the same side of the street of your development.
Yeah, that's in my bill.
Misalignment between municipal plans and zoning districts. So the zoning districts that have come online, municipal plans can take a long time to get through the process. So there's some worry about appeals to a project that meets the zoning district, but doesn't meet the municipal plan yet because the municipal plan hasn't been brought up. So maybe a correction there. I have some things in wetlands in here. I'm gonna put.
Honestly, municipal plans are revisited all the time on a fairly regular basis, so it could be 1 year, it could be absolutely.
But we have seen in municipal plans where they've gotten extremely stuck.
Right.
Around what does the legislature mean? What's in our plan? Do we need it? Like, it's just not that simple. That's another area where people are.
And we have developers that we can have come in to sort of talk more about that. Impact fees.
Yeah.
When you all are investing a lot of money into allowing housing to be built, and then a community adds an impact fee to that unit of housing, it sort of undoes the good. I
Well, that's
know.
an unregulated area, I think, at the moment with
Yeah.
municipalities.
And I know towns are under extreme pressure, right? It's very hard to get the development, the infrastructure, the development they need. And that's why I think passing things like CHIP was incredibly important, to give new tools to communities. But we have to align housing policy that helps, especially when it's a per bedroom
Yeah.
fee. You're really hitting that working family.
I'd like to look at a square footage fee over a per bedroom fee, that if they're gonna have impact fees, it not be per bedroom.
Also, I mean, question as we begin to look at this, what have you done with VLCT to raise this and have this conversation? You guys,
Not much.
not, okay.
This is a live conversation.
Oh,
Yeah.
I appreciate that, I'm just curious.
Yeah, and this was a newer one that came to my attention as, we're prepping for the session, so,
I'm very concerned with the LURB and the direction it's going. We need some guardrails or to extend the rulemaking time and extend the extensions, because the
Yeah.
trajectory from the messages I'm getting from people I respect, it's alarming.
yeah, and I don't want to undermine the work that they're doing. I know they have a ton on their plate, and it is a huge bill.
Right.
They have a ton of, direction they've been given, and I think 2 years in, a technical correction to say, okay, we want to make sure tier 1 works. We need to, we need to do these things, because if pieces don't work, the whole thing falls apart.
The exemptions were meant to be easy on-roads to the tiers.
Right.
That was the intent when we passed them. And we think we would have to see a very good reason to depart downward from the exemptions that we created. And I hope they realize that. That was absolutely the intent.
And we'll have to figure out how to support communities who are saying like, oh, I don't know about this.
Right. And support communities that are saying, we're all in, and we're still struggling with
Right.
this, right? Like that's South Burlington.
Well, and we still have these concerns too, I mean, in terms of what we can take on board. Okay.
Okay.
Impact.
Professional
I think that's
services, availability, cost for our small developers, like those ones who are coming out through, VHIP. It can be really hard to get a, wetlands professional, engineer professional, to put you on their docket, right? Like everything else, these are limited professions in Vermont, and when you have a project of 150 units that you're gonna review, or a project of 4 units that you're gonna review, that 4-unit project can get down on the list. And so our small developers can be waiting a really long time and putting out money to get a professional opinion, so they can submit that opinion to DEC to be told, you don't need, you're not in a wetland, or you don't need to go through wastewater.
But aren't our wetland maps pretty clear?
No.
They're not as bad as our flood maps.
No.
That's a great debate right now on the
Yeah.
wetland maps.
Absolutely not. It's not just small developers, it's small farms. It's a lot of people who are told, by the way, get another wetland delineation because yours is 5 years out of date. That's tens of thousands of dollars just casually
But even just
being requested.
without, to be told like, you're all set, you've had to put out
Oh,
that money to
absolutely.
hire the professionals. So if there's an opportunity to, especially for our small guys,
So given that we don't have jurisdiction over the wetlands, I would encourage you to add your concerns to, SNREs.
I would love for us to get A&R in here to talk about concurrent and streamlined and shorter permit timelines.
and I met the new commissioner of DEC, and I think she's very open to these conversations. Okay, last one, big one. So the Home Act put in some pieces there about, in terms of deed covenants, HOA bylaws, moving forward, you can't restrict these things. But everything that's still in place is still in place. And there's a lot of these restrictions in place across Vermont of saying this HOA will not allow any ADUs, any small development units to be added, or, this neighborhood, all 70 homes have deed restrictions that say no ADUs, nothing like that can be added. And towns that still find ways to put in exclusionary zoning. We have a proposal that doesn't interfere with the rights of those HOAs, but says, or towns or neighborhoods, if you are applying for state funds, whether it's to upgrade your wastewater system or to get more infrastructure dollars, that there is, especially when these are competitive in their sport, that you lose points on your score if you have restrictions that don't allow new housing, that don't meet the state's clear goals of housing.
To go back to our intent.
Right. So it's probably not as simple as I'm saying it, but that's the goal. I live in Jericho. I live in a neighborhood that has an HOA that says you can't build anything else here. And there is ample space if somebody wanted to put ADUs in, if somebody wanted to say, I could put 3 units here, or I could put 4 units here. Or as a community, we said, instead of a rec field here, this would be a great place for 12 condos. We can't do that under our current HOA, and I think it would take us having to say, you know what, when we need to get our wastewater system fixed, those state dollars that can help are not available to us to get some of the folks to.
I think this is actually terrific. I think it's a great proposal. And I think as we prep for that kind of testimony, obviously we want to know how many HOAs there are in the state and how many,
Yeah, I think those have to register with the Secretary of State, so I'm thinking we can find that. I know from I'll say my Jericho Sherpa, who has taken me around the town.
Such a great term.
There are about 2,000 households in Jericho, and 500 have restricted deeds or under restricted
Williston
HOA.
having this conversation.
And they're in places where we're saying, well, this is where we can grow. Like, well, no, legally we can't. So if this is, and this is indicative of what's happening around the state, though Jericho has a particular reputation for saying no to housing over the years, that we're trying to change. We're trying to move past that, but I think something like this.
Nicer than we, in my bill, it says you cannot restrict ADUs, you cannot prohibit in-home childcare centers. There are other bills out there, you cannot restrict gardens, you cannot. We
remember this when it was just clotheslines.
Right, yes,
The line to dry your clothes, which was restricted in any of these housing associations.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so I think this is terrific, and I think we would definitely.
Appeal through
be taking
here. We do care about appeals. We can come back and talk about that.
Yeah, and we will be, it's that, because I think, I don't know if you were in here, but we are gonna take it up first, then it's gonna go first, and SNRE is gonna start, and then it comes to us.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Well, and thank you for your work on this, continued work. I mean, as, I don't know if Randy and Tom know that you've been working on these Act 250 pieces right from the beginning.
Since previous jobs.
Yeah, which is great. No, it's terrific. So thank you for your continued support and interest in this.
Yeah, thank you for having me. We're, happy to stay engaged throughout the session.
Great, and we really appreciate that. And language on this, you've given me, I think.
Yes,
Great. Cam, if you're listening.
You didn't weigh in on VITA's request to support MOAR to expand their authority, but that's maybe another discussion actually.
It's another discussion. I think more loans better, but anyway. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think until Let's Grow Homes shows up, let's take a 2-minute break. Let's Grow Homes is supposed to start at 11:25, but they're not here. So we'll start as soon as they show up. So don't go too far, David, until